Hello and welcome to The Home Experience, a podcast where we discuss movies and TV shows currently available in the home market. I'm Adam Barnard.
And I'm Jackson Smith.
And today we're going to talk about the sci-fi epic Ready Player One. So before we begin, I just want to say that this property, this book, this movie, these characters are very near and dear to my heart. In a way that I feel like Indiana Jones or other great adventure epics were very near and dear to previous generations, movies that were out in theaters or adventures that were published when someone was still in their formative years. So this is going to be a very personal discussion in a way because I connected with this and a lot of other people didn't, which was interesting.
Well, enough people did for them to make it into a movie, clearly.
That is true. That is true. But, online culture doesn't like to let people enjoy things, so...
Anything. Literally anything. You can't enjoy anything.
You had fun? Up yours. You're not supposed to.
How dare you?
Yeah. So I'll just give a bit of background because you and I have had different experiences with this specific story. I picked up the book a couple years ago, Ready Player One. I think it was 2016. I was home from college for a little while, and I can't remember why. I think it was recommended to me by my old roommate from Chapman, and I didn't have much expectations. I just heard they might be making a movie. I think Spielberg was attached at the time, so I was like, okay, let me get ahead of the curve and read a book way before it becomes a movie.
Yeah.
And I tore through it in a couple days, and it was just this transcendent experience where it was me in my bedroom and my surroundings didn't matter. It was like I was transported into a virtual reality simply through text on a page. And that's experience for me is so rare as a reader. And I know that's sad to say because some people are very avid readers and have that visual imagination. For me, it takes a really transcendent property to bring me to that place, to where when I hear, I don't want anyone to walk in the room. I just want to exist in this little bubble and feel like I'm a part of something different. And so that was my experience with the book. And then I watched the movie a couple years later, but I want to hear how you saw the movie and read the book in a different order as well.
Well, yeah, I mean, you sent the book to me very soon after reading it. Like, Jackson, you have to read this. And I'm a weird reader. I recognize, and I say this in the least pretentious way possible, but I do read a lot more than most other people my age. Yeah. Most people our age really don't read that much, and comparatively speaking, I read a lot. But also, comparatively speaking, it's very hard for me to read. I'm not the kind of person who reads before I go to bed or reads whenever I have spare time. I do most of my reading when I'm on flights. That's a thing for me. It's I travel a lot. So whenever I'm on a flight, I'll always buy a book for the flight,
From the Nicholas Sparks stand, right?
More from the Agatha Christie stand.
Okay, good.
I'm super big into mysteries, but you had recommended this book to me, and you had given me this book. But I had made a sort of semi-conscious decision to watch the movie first.
Yeah.
Almost like I knew we would be having a discussion, and I thought it would make it more interesting.
Well, at first, much to my chagrin that you didn't read the book first, I was a very vocal lobbyist for reading the book before you see the movie. But I think it provided you an interesting perspective.
It did. And it's also, this was a little bit exceptional. Most of the time, I really don't like doing that. I did that with Gone Girl. I read the book after I saw the movie, and I was like, I kind of wish I had flipped that order. I mean, I love both of them very deeply, but just the way I experienced that story, it would have been fun to sort of discover it as a book first and then go see the movie and sort of rediscover it in a way. So I had regretted that decision. So I was like, oh, well, maybe I should read the book first. But Ready Player One is, like you said, it's an interesting property because everybody's got an opinion on it. It came out, I think, in 2011. It was a big hit when it came out. Everybody really liked it. And then Gamergate happened. And for those of you who don't know what Gamergate was, it was this huge online war between, well, it wasn't really between anyone. Basically, this very small, nasty, vocal subset of video game culture started, bullying and harassing I think it was female gaming critics, because they didn't think they were like well versed enough in gaming culture, and they were like, it was all this like toxic gatekeeping culture is the term that got thrown around, where it was like, oh well, you're not a real fan of something if you don't know X, Y, and Z about it. And what happened then after that was a lot of people turned on Ready Player One, because, as we'll talk about, the story focuses very much on video game trivia as a form of currency, which is like, that's not so much a state. Yeah, I mean, it's like, for those who have like really read the book or seen the movie, it's like that's not so much a thing. I feel like that's more an element of that world, as opposed to like a thing that the writer is like saying, like, you need to know how to play Joust perfectly to like live properly in this world. Like, that's not what the book is about. But there, like, a lot of people turned against it. There was a lot of controversy around the book, and then the movie came out, and everybody immediately was like, oh wow, that's a totally different ball game. So I made the decision to read the book afterwards, just because I wanted to, I don't know, I was curious. I wanted to see sort of what I wanted to experience the movie as this pure thing, because I was going to be the only one who was going to experience the movie as this pure thing, and then go back to the source material later. And I mean, obviously, I mean, like, I didn't have quite the transcendent experience that you had. Sure. And we'll get into some of those reasons later on in the podcast. But I did really like the book, and I do think the movie is I think it's a successful / very interesting adaptation of that piece of literature specifically. And I'm actually kind of glad I experienced it in the way I did, because I think it's offered me a semi-interesting perspective on the material.
It feels like receiving this book is how Moses would have felt receiving the 10 Commandments, except this is for movie fandom. Like, this is the movie fandom's version of the 10 Commandments. Like, you come down from the mountain, you get this text from God.
Well, video game fans.
Well, yeah. I mean,
like,
but the thing is, most of the nerd culture, like 80% of it in the book, comes from film and TV. You know what I'm saying? Like, what they talk about with Star Wars or Indiana Jones or Back to the Future, him driving the DeLorean. Maybe that's just because I'm so impervious and kind of out of the loop with video games, so I just don't remember that part of Ready Player One, the book.
Yeah, the book references all of these video games like Dungeons and Dragons and Joust, and they play very big roles in the plot. So it's like, when he's talking about these games, I got the feeling that this was the kind of book that was meant to be enjoyed by someone, who grew up in the golden age of video games, grew up in the 80s and played all these games on their old Atari systems. And that's just not me. So it was like, I enjoyed the book kind of from a distance.
Sure.
But it does sort of immerse itself in 80s pop culture and Spielberg movies. Funny enough that he ended up directing it, but like, it runs the gambit of stuff that it references.
Yeah, and what's interesting is, like, Ernest Cline, who's the author, I never get a sense that he's pandering, which is interesting, because it's very easy to pander to this kind of entitled community of geek fandom. But for me, my experience with the book is it's so honest. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's such a sincerity to some of the characters and some of the stories, and even the, using other people's creative work as like the cornerstone, the foundation of your story. It could come off as really crappy fan fiction that's just been buried in some ether of the internet that no one really wants to visit. But somehow he made both the book and the screenplay, which he co-wrote, I believe, coherent and well presented for the mediums that he wrote for, and that's kind of something that amazed me, because part of the critique was like, oh, the movie's just going to feel like fan fiction, or oh, the book is too lofty in its goal. And I really think it somehow found a way to be grounded and resonant despite just being a total nerd fest.
Well, we're going to talk a little bit more about how this movie adapted this book specifically, but in the meantime, check out the trailer.
My name's Wade Watts. My dad picked that name because it sounded like a superhero's alter ego, like Peter Parker or Bruce Banner. But he died when I was a kid, my mom too. And I ended up here. Sitting here in my tiny corner of nowhere. There's nowhere left to go. Nowhere. Except the Oasis. a whole virtual universe.
Let me take you on a trip around the world and back.
Who is this Parzival, and how the hell is he winning?
Find him. This isn't just a game. I'm talking about actual life and death stuff.
The Oasis, the world's most important economic resource. And it's nothing less than a war for control of the future.
Are you willing to fight?
Help us save the Oasis.
Ready Player One is directed by Steven Spielberg and written by Zach Penn and Ernest Cline. It's available to rent or purchase on most platforms. So this story is set, I think, something like 20, 30 years in the future. And basically, by this point in history, something called the Oasis, which is an online video game platform a la World of Warcraft, has basically consumed everybody's lives. The world has gotten really crappy and everybody just basically spends their time in this virtual reality. They've all got virtual reality goggles and virtual reality gloves, and you can do pretty much anything you want in the Oasis. Like you can play sports, you can go on vacation, but what a lot of people go in the Oasis to do is solve this Easter egg challenge brought about by the game's creator, who is
James Halliday.
James Halliday. I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I forgot his name. They say it like 100 times during the movie. No, so James Halliday, played by Mark Rylance, who was in Spielberg's other movies, Bridge of Spies, The BFG. He plays this sort of neurotic Steve Jobs type, nerd god, basically, who created this video game. And right before he died, he created this challenge where you were supposed to, there are 3 different keys hidden somewhere in the Oasis in the full video game, and if you could find all of these keys, you would get an Easter egg. And if you got the Easter egg, you basically get the rights to the Oasis. You basically get the whole company. And it starts off as kind of like a fun challenge for everyone, but because the Oasis is just the biggest thing on the planet, it's a lot more political. Like they've got a competing corporation, IOI, that's like sending a bunch of people into the video game for the express purpose of finding the Easter egg. And then you've got this guy. His name is Parzival in the game, and he and his friends basically set out in search of the Easter egg, and the rest is history. So,
that was a really, really well-framed summary that I know you didn't have a script for.
If
so you
only
somehow...
I could have remembered anybody's names. If only if I could have remembered anybody's names. So anyway, so that's the movie. That's what it's about. Adam, what did you think of the movie Ready Player One?
The movie Ready Player One, I did not love upon first viewing. I actually kind of texted you a semi-rant and said they missed the point. I think it was good. I don't know. I feel disoriented. Like something feels off. And I was very frustrated at a few specific elements in the story, which I'm sure we'll discuss, which to this day I still believe are flaws. It's just the first time they really threw me for a loop, and subsequent viewings, I kind of became numb to them. I just accepted them, that they kind of, some of these story elements or plot dynamics had to happen for the sake of condensing this into 2 hours and 20 minutes, which is already a pretty bloated runtime.
Yeah, that's
to
long,
be honest.
Yeah.
And it kind of still has a nice brisk pace. So you're not like, I don't ever feel like I'm watching a Transformers movie, even when it does sag like towards, right before the third act. I grew to love it upon subsequent rewatches because I realized it captured the magic, but formatted for the big screen. Yeah. If that makes sense. Like, I did not at all get the same feeling watching the movie than I did reading the book, yet somehow I think the movie is a brilliant adaptation of the book. I don't know how to describe such a paradox like that. I mean, to me, it's like I almost view them as different chapters because such radically different things happened in the book and the movie. How Parzival and Artemis met, how their relationship developed, which in the movie I thought it was very inorganic and forced and a little creepy in the first half, whereas in the book it felt more honest. It's like, I think in the book, like that feeling of meeting the girl and then having her being out of your league, but then realizing that you're so similar that you might actually get along with her. It's like this, and you're two teenagers like falling in love for the first time. That dynamic in the book was so relatable for me, and fun for me to live vicariously through. In the movie, he falls in love and he becomes very overbearing towards her, and it's not an organic falling in love that. Because in the book, I rooted for Parzival. I rooted for them as a couple. In the movie, I didn't want to root for them as a couple because he was so obnoxious and overbearing. Yeah, that's kind of my intro monologue, at least.
Well, yeah, for those of you who don't know, Artemis, she's played by Olivia Cook in the movie. She's Parzival's love interest. She's another gamer who's searching for the Easter egg. She's got much more personally motivated reasons than Parzival does. But yes, obviously they fall in love because why wouldn't they?
But to answer your question about, or to respond to the part about there being a corporation and kind of a business angle, you know, it's not just fun and games. It's not a cool challenge. It's like
it's
the Oasis.
War.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nolan Sorrento, who's played by Ben Mendelsohn, says it's nothing less than a war for the future of humanity. And the thing is, I agree with him. Now, I know it's not good to say that you agree with what's traditionally framed as like the villains, but I actually understand where they're coming from. And I think it's realistic. And I don't think inherently what they're trying to do is wrong. The problem is IOI is corrupt to the core, and Nolan Sorrento is corrupt to the core, and they kill people to get what they want. You know, it's not like, a company has a vision for Oasis. It's not something where I don't see anything inherently being wrong. I just see the way they handle it being wrong. And you kind of, it develops into this very dystopian, almost borderline young adult dynamic as the story goes on of these kids who are kind of up against the cold, hard capitalist world that's crushing down on their hopes and futures, and people are living on the streets. And there's this polarity between the beauty and the visual dynamism and the possibility of the Oasis and just the drab, desaturated, concrete, monolithic structures that is modern-day Columbus, Ohio. Which I found was interesting and not always present in the book. I felt like the contrast was more clear in the movie because, again, it's a visual format. It just, a picture is worth 1,000 words, so I don't need pages of exposition on Columbus. I just see a few frames of how Spielberg designed, you know, the live action components, and you're like, oh, I get the dynamic of this kind of all too close to reality future.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of that is because the book is first person and it's all from Wade's perspective in the book. So a lot of the corporation dynamics you're seeing, you understand are happening off screen, whereas in the movie they're happening on screen. I want to backtrack a little bit because your experience with this movie sounds very, very similar to my experience when I saw Annihilation earlier this year. Annihilation was that book for me. I think the same friend actually recommended Annihilation to me who recommended Ready Player One to you. But I bought it, I read it, and I was like, oh my gosh, that was amazing. That was brilliant. That's going to make such an excellent movie. And then I saw the cast and I was like, oh my gosh, Natalie Portman's in it. The guy from Ex Machina is doing it. And then I saw the movie and it was like totally different. They changed literally everything from the book except like the basic setting and the skeleton of the characters. Like literally everything else that happens in the movie is different. So the first time I saw it, there was just this whiplash where I was like, oh, I have no idea what I'm supposed to be feeling about this. I understand that it's good, I think, but I don't know because I can't separate. I can't
exactly.
Yeah, so it's like that's the problem. That's my problem when I read the book first. A lot of times is it always ruins the movie going experience for me, and I always treasure the movie going experience so much, which is maybe why I swapped it for Ready Player One. But anyway, what happened is on subsequent viewings, I ended up really growing to love Annihilation, and it's Probably one of my favorite movies of the year. But all of this is to say, I know how you feel.
Sure.
I know how you feel, but my first time seeing Ready Player One, I really liked it. I really liked this movie. I mean, just in a pure enjoyment standpoint, I know there are a lot of really smart critics who I love and listen to who have told me repeatedly that this movie is shit.
Yeah.
I don't care. I really liked it. So
yeah, what happened with this was what happened with me and Tintin, which is also a Spielberg film that was kind of a barrier breaker in terms of the technology and the motion capture and the, you know, kind of blending digital like video game but also live action elements, like just kind of with that aesthetic, you know, how they I think the whole movie was kind of like shot like a movie on motion capture stages when it could have easily just been an animated movie, you know. So it kind of, and the design in 2011 was getting so good that it was hitting the uncanny valley. It wasn't fake, but it was also wasn't real. It was just, it's very confusing visually. And as someone who grew up with the comics of, I don't want to call them, I don't know if you can call them comics or volumes of Tintin.
They're comics, yeah.
I mean, my dad has a Commonwealth background, so he introduced that to me, and like that was my Indiana Jones before I was old enough to watch Indiana Jones, quite frankly.
That must have been a disturbing movie then.
What with Tintin or Indiana Jones?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, when I saw that, it was like it missed the goddamn point of Tintin. Just a galactic miss. Now, I still think Tintin is an okay movie, but everything that I held dear about the books was just like 3 different volumes were cobbled together to make one movie that had very little focus on character. The character focus that wasn't there was unrealistic and not true to the characters that were created. And it was largely reliant on technology to tell a story versus good storytelling. And especially when it's someone like Spielberg, you know he's one of the best storytellers like around, one of the best visual storytellers around. So when he just spends, you know, throws in these action sequences, it's like he's trying to do like demo reels, but he's putting the demo reels in the movie, and he's like surgically removing the heart of the movie, which is all I really cared about. I didn't care about how good a Tintin movie looked. I cared about how it'd make me feel, you know what I'm saying? And like how it would tap into this extremely rich source material and very unique tone. So all that to say, I kind of feel the same way about Ready Player One.
Well, the visual effects definitely got better.
But
like the visual effects definitely got better.
And that was something I was concerned about when watching the trailer for Ready Player One, or the trailers. I just thought, again, like he missed the point of what the visuals could be, because what was described in the book I felt gave it a different aesthetic. It wasn't one that was so photoreal. But I don't know what they did. They nailed it. Because it still kind of falls in the territory of the uncanny valley, but somehow it's like nothing you've ever seen before. Yeah. It's like nothing you've ever seen. It's the perfect mix between photoreal lighting and also fantastical elements. And like part of the reason I go back to watch the movie is just because of all the in-game footage. It's like seeing Avatar for the first time. It's just like, holy shit. Like, this is crazy. I didn't know movies could... Or, like, seeing Jurassic Park for the first time. It's like, this is nuts. Like, the ante has been upped.
I mean, that's the thing. It is a video game. Like, in the context of the movie, all of the motion capture stuff is just when they're in the Oasis, and the rest is live action. So it is probably naturally the best use of motion capture in a movie, just because if there is an uncanny valley... So what? It's a video game. Like there's uncanny valleys in like every video game. So it's like, so what was great about doing it all motion capture in the movie was that it added to the realism of it, if that makes sense. Like by looking more surreal, it added to the realism of it. And and to like the visual effects, like what we can do with motion capture has just advanced so much since Avatar, you know, like since they really changed the game. Like people have like blue hair, red hair, and they can like make their avatar like have like alien limbs and stuff. Like it doesn't look like but you buy it. You totally buy it, you know. And I don't remember that stuff in the book. How it was described in the book, it seemed like everybody had like semi-normal looking avatars.
Sure. The other big change, which is worth noting, is the fact that in the book it was primarily 80s culture. Like the whole take on the video game and the Easter egg was like Halliday grew up in the 80s, and that's he just kept the Oasis like exclusive to the 80s, even though that we were 60 years in the future. The difference is in the Halliday in the movie is like just pop culture. He's a pop culture nerd. He's not an 80s nerd. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if I like that decision. I think that's part of what was lost. I was ready for like the most campy 80s throwback, you know? And it was just like all of pop culture. And that didn't... it was a creative choice that opened some opportunity and closed other doors, you know, so it was a true trade-off in the sense of like what it accomplished creatively.
Well, here's the thing. In the novel and in the movie, the Oasis is an open space for anybody to explore whatever. So it is all kinds of pop culture. But Halliday's, specifically all Halliday's contests, like Halliday's challenge to find the keys and get the egg in both circumstances is very 80s focused. But I think what the movie did, which the book didn't really go out of its way to do, was include more references to more modern video games.
Sure.
See, like in the book,
like you have Halo, you have like Master Chief.
Yeah, like you have like the Master Chief from Halo. You've got a bunch of Overwatch characters. Like what I really like, and I really actually really liked this about the movie, because I think like when we think of video game culture, you know, it isn't just people who, you know, played Atari in the 80s. It's, you know, 12-year-olds who play Call of Duty Zombies now. So I like
Happy memories.
Yeah, really. But I like that the movie had a much more holistic view of what video game culture is and what it would look like if a space like the Oasis did really exist. Like, yeah, you had people like all of the people searching, like all of the people in Parzival's clan, they're all searching for Halliday's Easter egg, and all of their stuff is all very, you know, 80s oriented. Like he dresses up like Buckaroo Banzai to a party. You know, they do like Saturday Night Fever when they're at the party.
Oh my God,
like, he does like the Say Anything thing, Joan Cusack thing with the boombox at one point. But in the background, you've got like Serenity from Firefly. You've got like the Iron Giant. Like you've got like all of these other references to all of these different areas of pop culture. And for me, it added to the realism of the movie. And I really liked that.
Yeah, certainly. When the Serenity flew into frame, I had this moment where I was like, no, that can't. What?
I know, right?
Seriously? That's so... And then it immediately turned into, holy shit, that's so cool.
Everybody had a moment like that. I feel like that, like with this movie, like at least everybody at least had one moment where they went like, I know what that is. But, you know, like a good movie has that in the background, but it is also first and foremost a good story. And I did think both the book and the movie had a good story. But what the movie liked about its own story that I kind of missed from the book was it really dug deep into Halliday. It really dug deep into his character and sort of, you know, why he created the Oasis and why it is the way it is. And what I liked about it too is it centered the challenges more around digging deep into his personal psyche as opposed to just digging deep into the things that he liked. Like in the book, all of the challenges are it all basically comes down to playing the video games that Halliday liked perfectly. Like it's like he's got to play a perfect game of Pac-Man. He's got to play a perfect game of Joust. He's got to go through war games and recite the whole movie perfectly. Whereas like in the movie, the challenges involve the character's critical thinking a little bit more, and they involve critical thinking in relationship to his life. Like what he's doing through the challenges, he's basically deconstructing his own myth. Like everybody starts the movie as like, oh, Halliday was like this amazing, you know, god basically, and by the end of the movie they see him more as a human being, and they're able to sort of handle the Oasis differently and hopefully better than he ever would have been able to. So I really like that element of it personally, but I'm curious to hear what your perspective on that is.
Yeah, I mean, they anchored it in emotion instead of heritage or like cultural heritage. You know what I'm saying? It's like, yeah, it was all about culture in the book, and in the movie it's all about Halliday, but not just Halliday as like a person or his business pursuits. It was about Halliday's relationships with a girl he loved who his business partner ended up marrying, and that was Kira, or was the gamer tag, and she married Ogden Morrow, who was played by Simon Pegg, and that's factored into the second level, I think. I guess that pretty much the one with The Shining, which was so cool.
Yeah, there's a huge sequence in the movie where they have to they take, I guess, what was the reenactment thing of the book, and imagine it cinematically, and what that is basically like recreating the entirety of The Shining, and it is again visually very impressive and a lot of fun to watch. So.
Yeah, totally. So and that was actually a diversion for what the second challenge actually is, which is about the night that Halliday didn't ask the girl to go dancing when she wanted to go dancing, and that's like when he lost his opportunity. And so like the whole theme around it was like take the leap, and you're basically, these characters are learning lessons. Like Parzival learns in his own life to take the leap, because Halliday is still serving as this like mentor from the grave. He's like Henry in the Book of Henry. Cut that out. You should cut that out.
Oh no, I'm keeping that in.
Gosh, damn it. All right. But you see what I'm saying? Like
I do, yeah.
The part that broke my heart for me, I don't want to say broke my heart, it just made me feel something very deeply, and I know this was Spielberg's hand in it, was when Parzival was talking to Ogden Morrow, and he said Kira wasn't the rosebud of the story. He said, you were the rosebud of the story. Like Halliday couldn't stand to lose his friend like he lost the girl. And that was like, oh, it hurts so good.
Yeah, well,
and it was played so true, like love triangles are messy, and people who are geniuses to the level that Halliday are messy, and they don't know how to interact with people, but it doesn't mean they don't feel the same depth of emotion of love and friendship and betrayal and hurt and fear, even if, their creations have made them a billionaire and have defined a generation. And so, yeah, it was a shockingly sharp insight into like a character study for people in these kinds of situations, all on a sci-fi canvas or futuristic sci-fi canvas.
Well, what I liked about all of what you just said, just personally, was because I felt like it was all kind of a microcosm for how we approach video games. Like Halliday is kind of the classic video game nerd. Like he's got like crazy hair, he has trouble interacting with people, but he's like an amazing programmer, and he's like a visionary, and he can play every video game perfectly, but that doesn't mean that he's a functional human being. And I feel like our lead characters are kind of they kind of represent a new era of video gaming where everybody gets together or goes online and plays with their friends, and it's a much more like interactive experience, and it's an experience that involves, like, for instance, like personally, like why I responded to this personally is because my favorite game is Mario Kart. And I don't know if you know this, Adam, but playing Mario Kart by yourself is just not fun at all. It's just like I'm playing against the computer. Whereas if you're playing with your friends, you can team up, you can play against each other. It just enriches the experience a lot more. And the moral of the movie, and kind of the book as well, but the moral of the movie to me was like, video games are so much of more of an enriching experience when you can experience it as a collective, when you can experience it with your friends as a group. I think that like the best experiences we've all had with video games are those experiences. And I think that was just something very true. And I thought the movie, through examining Halliday's life, had a very interesting way of expressing that singular idea.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because again, I think that's a prerogative of Steven Spielberg, because that wasn't really in the book. I think like the movie, maybe kind of there's some subtext, but the movie drives home the lesson, quote, that the only thing that's real is reality. It's like reality is the only thing that's real. And it was, and that's kind of like the voiceover they end the movie with. I'll just jump ahead to the end. It's like where Parzival and his quote clan inherits the Oasis, and they decide to shut it off for 2 days of the week, because they say like it's great that we have so much connectivity and interaction, but like you can't shut yourself off from the real world. Like there's a lesson in balance and human connection.
Halliday shut himself off from the real. That was probably the most disappointing aspect of the book for me, because I was waiting for that to be something that pops up at the end, the whole like, oh, we're going to give people 2 days a week to sort of make the world better specifically, because that's the whole
Sure.
problem in this world, is that nobody's making the world better because everybody just wants to live
They're
in
playing
Oasis.
Fortnite. Yeah.
You know, and that was just not the case in the book. The book was just entirely about him getting the egg and getting the girl. And it was a satisfying journey, but I didn't feel like it achieved a greater point, I guess, like the movie did. I mean, it specifically didn't get to that point. I mean, clearly that wasn't a point it was trying to get at, but I really liked that point. I was a little disappointed when at the end of the day, it really was just about him reciting Monty Python and the Holy Grail correctly. But I don't know. That might have just been because I read it out of order. I don't know.
It's a different format. Like in the movie, you know, when you get to the last 10 minutes, you're expecting it to thematically and emotionally kind of tie itself up with a bow or give you some kind of ending. You know what I'm saying? For a book, it's kind of like, again, it's a more immersive experience inherently. You know, the author's able to craft more detail. It's not the production designers and the artist and everybody else. It's just the author doing everything in a book.
Yeah.
It's a much less collaborative of a medium. So, like, I think that format lends itself to just thoroughly immersing yourself in the author's imagination. And yeah, Ernest Cline isn't like a person who revolves around theme, in my opinion. He revolves around story and story innovation. Like, he co-wrote Fanboys, which, oh my God, I love. I really want to convince you to do a podcast on it because I think it's just, it's so underrated. But he has a certain...
I keep meaning to watch it, yeah.
He's a certain brand of fan culture geek stories that aren't trash. I guess the best way, and a lot of people disagree with me, but that's my opinion. So
I was going to say, like, I think he really understands why these things are special, you know, like
Sure.
that, like,
Oh, yeah.
like specifically in the book, I think, you know, he understands the appeal. Like there is a specific instance where like Parzival just gets lost playing Pac-Man for hours. And it's like, that's just such a accurate, that's exactly what happens when you play Pac-Man, is you do get lost in it for hours. You know, I think what the book was really good at that the movie did struggle a little bit with in some places was really crafting an atmosphere and a mood. Like,
Sure.
like the movie just rushes through. It's got a lot of ground to cover, so it rushes through a lot. But you don't get to experience any real development with Parzival and Artemis's relationship. It just kind of happens for necessity in the movie, you know, like, and that's true of how we experience the world too. Like, I feel like the amount of detail he goes into about how this dystopia works and about how it's being experienced by everybody in the novel. That was one of my favorite parts. Like,
Sure,
ironically,
yeah.
one of my favorite parts of the book was him talking about the real world. Like, there's this extended sequence in the book where he has to like infiltrate IOI and he like gets arrested.
I was going to bring that up.
Yeah, like all of that detail in the book was just like, it was so vivid and it was so well written.
It became
you know,
a thriller. It's like
it
an espionage undercover thriller for a couple chapters.
Yeah, and
so
it's
much
like,
fun.
and it's like, exactly. And it's like with the movie, it was like the world is like, you can tell the world is kind of trash, but you don't really get a sense of how bad it is, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
you know?
I mean, yeah, it's very tame and monochromatic, and like we're only seeing one city, but it was a weird design, and it was I would have. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I would have liked to see more. Maybe it would have been better to see less. You know, I just know something was off balance with kind of the real world.
It was, I mean, it's like, I really think it was like, it was beautifully designed, but that movie does not, like, you're right. It's 2.5 hours, and it does not feel like that because they have to pack a lot into that 2.5 hours. So it's like, you're never really given time to like take in anything. It's all just fun, which is great. I really enjoyed it. But the book, like, there's just so many little details in the book that just made the atmosphere feel so rich. Like, another really small thing that I'm actually kind of glad they didn't put in the movie because it would have been super weird. But like, there's a section in the book where he's got to like isolate himself to like search for the egg. So he shaves off all his body hair because that way it won't cause irritation when he's wearing a suit. And it's like, it's one of those things where it's like, of course you can't put that in the movie because that would just be like so gross, but also like, oh my gosh, like what a great detail. Like, that's just such a, like, Yeah.
Yeah, but it's like, I don't want
it's-
a shaving scene in a movie. Like, it's just a
Well, see,
nightmare.
that's what they would have gotten if they would have gotten Danny Boyle to direct it, but they got Steven Spielberg.
Oh my
So
God. Danny Boyle,
got no place in Steven Spielberg.
Ready Player One Danny Boyle movie would be a sight to behold.
That would be intense. That'd be intense, man.
It's like, if you thought this movie was fast paced, wait till you see what he does.
Gosh, yeah, I'm in a panic attack of a movie. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I mean, the pace was breakneck. Like, it kind of reminds me a bit of The Force Awakens or like Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, where it's just like go, 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 straight through to the end. One of my other issues, which I think is a good time to bring up now, is the battle at the end, where Parzival summons an army and everyone in their Halo or Gremlins or whatever.
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Exactly. Yeah. Whatever they're dressed as, is just this wave after wave of pop culture avatars that are just charging this fortress. It goes full Tintin. It goes full Transformers, where it's just like, okay, I don't know what's going on and I don't give a damn. And thankfully it's pretty, it recovers pretty quickly, but it's like, again, I get that, like, the people go to see these movies because of the blockbuster action, but there's already been plenty of blockbuster action the first hour and a half, and what's been missing is some of the heart and some of the truth in the characters and the relationship. Like I said with Artemis and Parzival. So it's like, if you have a 10-minute section here, why am I getting a 10-minute action sequence that feels either redundant or superfluous when, like, the anchors, the developing the anchors of this story has been neglected? That was, and I get frustrated just talking about it, because it's like, I felt like Parzival and Artemis in the book were better developed, and that's shocking that I should even be saying that out loud, knowing, that it's a Steven Spielberg film and a lot of talented people worked on the script to get it where it was.
Well, yeah, I mean, when Parzival tells Artemis at one point in the book, "I love you," it's like, it's
earned.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, it's like, I mean, it's like, you get it. It makes sense. When Parzival in the movie tells Artemis, "I love you," it's like, dude, we barely know each other.
Yeah,
because so much of the plot's been having to spend on other things. Anyway, I want to talk about the final sequence because I have two very not interesting. My opinions aren't interesting, but two very key opinions about this. The first is, I credit where credit is due. Like, Steven Spielberg is really, really good at parallel action. And what I really liked about the climax of this movie is, I mean, basically what happens is Nolan Sorrento and all of IOI, they find the last challenge and they create this fortress, or they hole up in this fortress around it. And that's why Parzival sort of recruits everybody in the Oasis to go break in for them. But as that's happening, Artemis is trying to break out of IOI in the real world. So it's like,
they basically replaced Parzival's story in the book with Artemis in the movie. It's like, someone infiltrates IOI and sabotages them from the inside. It's just Artemis this time.
Exactly. Yeah. But what's great about that sequence is, like, how smartly Steven Spielberg is able to integrate the action going on in the Oasis with the action going on in the real world. Like, that was one of the things that really astonished me when I saw this movie for the first time, was just like that, a climax like that with that many levels of action on it is very, very hard to choreograph, especially when they're taking place on two different planes of reality. So it was a little chaotic once we were in the Oasis, but I gotta say, like, it was a real feat, and I'm actually really glad they spent the amount of time in the movie on it that they did, because it was just a, for me personally, like, at the end of the day, it was just a really expansive and satisfying end to the conflict of the movie. But I hated the Iron Giant in it. I just, like, and I know I'm like the 1500th person to say this, but, like, you missed the whole point of the Iron Giant. Like, the whole point is he's not a battle robot. Did you see the movie? Anyway, sorry, I had to rant.
No, I understand. I mean, I have no connection to the Iron Giant. I haven't seen the movie. I guess it's a cool design, so,
Yeah.
It's kind of like, I guess, putting, like, Pooh Bear or Big Bird in there and having them be a warrior. It's like, what the hell? Like, God, that's weird. Yeah, no, I want to say this, bouncing off your point. The last 20 minutes are we've said the last 20 minutes of a perfect movie. It's just the other 2 hours that isn't perfect. But it's like the last 10 minutes is a 10 out of 10. I mean, last 20 minutes is like a 10 out of 10 conclusion.
20 out of 20.
20 out of 20, sure. 5 out of 5, 4 out of 4. And just how they're in the back of the van in the, you know, that they're operating from a moving vehicle while in the Oasis deciding the fate of the world. Like, that's such an inherently tense pitch. You know what I'm saying? Where it's like someone's crashing into you, and if the van flips, it's like IOI gets the Oasis. Like, the stakes are so clearly drawn and are so high in the last 20 minutes. And, you know, the writers and Spielberg knew where to land with every single character to hit a true note. So it's like all the conclusion is just part of a much better movie, quite frankly.
Well, it's just like that's kind of the stuff that, like, that's the kind of stuff that you can't really do in a book, like, especially a first person book, because you have to center all the action around the first person's perspective. Like, weird example, I remember when I read Twilight for the first time, and I was like, this climax makes no sense. And then I saw the movie, I was like, oh, that's what happened.
Sure.
Because there's just all this stuff that happens in the climax of that story that you just don't get to see since you're from Bella's perspective. But because it's a movie, you can sort of get to see what's going on at different parts of the area. So
Totally.
yeah, and I also really like too how I'll just say this and then we can wrap up. But like I really like too how the movie did take advantage of its third person perspective. Like I like how they gave Artemis a lot more to do over the course of the movie. Like I like how they did give her some, like, they let her get to some of the challenges first, simply out of necessity. They let her do a little bit more. They let her be the one to infiltrate IOI. It's just like it just made the movie feel a lot more realistic to me. Like, it just made it feel like it was like, we're all in this together and we've all got to just fight to make sure this giant corporation doesn't get control of the Oasis. And to it sort of plays into that theme of, this is a movie about multiplayer video games and there are multiplayers, but that's just something that I personally liked.
Sure. And I'm going to echo your sentiment and take it a step further with Artemis, more specifically Olivia Cooke, who plays Artemis.
I love her.
You know, this is not like a prestige performance, so there's zero chance it's going to get any kind of recognition anywhere. I just have to say it's one of the most beautiful and engaging performances for this kind of character, this kind of movie that I've seen. And it's not so much like the character is brilliantly written, it's just like she finds a way to make every line delivery interesting and either quirky but in a genuine way, or heartfelt or sassy. There's just such a gambit of emotions and tonalities that she hits, and she's so good in both the real world and the Oasis. I mean, she upstages everyone, specifically Parzival, which is like, you're supposed to be anchored in Parzival. It's like, where's my Artemis spinoff? Like, I want to go hang out with her.
Here's the thing, though. If anybody's getting nominated for an Oscar for this movie, it's Mark Rylance, and rightfully so, because he also knocked it out of the...
I wasn't insinuating that anyone should get nominated. I'm just trying to say, like, these performances, I can glow about these performances, but that most people will dismiss and say, oh, it's just a blockbuster, you know, it's a cutesy, fun, energetic performance. I'm like, no. Like, the amount of talent and repertoire of experience and ability to be able to deliver a performance like this in both live action and motion capture.
That's hard.
And in another accent, and with all these kinds of inflections. Like, it gave her a bit more depth. You know what I'm saying? Like, she would stand up for herself at times. And it wasn't so much that, like, manic pixie dream girl type situation, which it could have very easily fallen into kind of a sexist slant.
Oh, it could have very easily fallen into that, yeah. But it didn't. It was very refreshing.
So in one sense, it's like, while they mishandled the romance, you know, I should want to root for Parzival and Artemis to become a couple because I like their story. But for me, it's like you want Parzival to get the girl because she's so cool. Because Olivia, it's not because of the writing, it's just because Olivia Cooke breathed in so much life and humanity to that character. It's like, because Parzival is your protagonist, it's like all of us want to end up with her. So in that case, we live vicariously through Parzival.
So, as from your perspective, as somebody who really loved the book and saw the movie multiple times, what would be your 5-star rating? What would be your 5-star rating for this movie?
What would be my 5-star rating for Ready Player One?
Yes.
Well, It's just funny because it's the same result as the last time you did it. Last time you asked me that same question for Kings of Summer, and I said 4 out of 5. And again, for Ready Player One, I'm going to say 4 out of 5 for the movie, just to be clear.
Yeah, just for the movie. I would say 4 out of 5 too. I mean, like, this is a movie that I'm just willing to overlook a lot of issues with it, like the fact that the romance never gets developed, like the fact that they totally messed up the Iron Giant, and that was I saw that as a big problem, because it's like, if you've seen the Iron Giant, you would know that's you've missed the whole point. So it's like that felt unrealistic to me. But like, it's the kind of movie where I can overlook a lot of those issues because of the craftsmanship involved. Like, this is is an intensely well-crafted movie, and it's like a really, in my opinion, a really clever take on this particular story, and is just really indicative of Spielberg's strengths as a filmmaker. So it's like, it's the kind of movie where it's like, the objective filmmaker in me wants to go like, it was like a 2.5, 3-star movie, and the Jackson in me wants to go like, no, it's like a 5-star movie. I loved it. So it's like, I'm going to compromise somewhere around the middle of that and say, like, yeah, 4 out of 5 I think is pretty fair, but I still really, really liked it, and I would definitely recommend it.
So next week we will be discussing a movie called Saturday Night Fever, which probably needs no introduction for anybody who's listening to this podcast over the age of 40. I discovered this a couple years ago. I knew it was considered a, quote, classic to some extent, and I felt like I needed to watch it. I came away, I haven't revisited it since I watched it the first time, but I came away thinking it was one of the best movies I'd seen, and it been incredibly misunderstood, and it meant a lot to me. But you haven't actually seen the movie yet, have you?
I have not seen it. I've seen the Saturday Night Fever sequence in Ready Player One. Haha. But I have not seen the actual movie. It's going to be exciting. I mean, most movies we've done on this podcast have at least been released in the last decade. Yeah. But this is something that was released before either of us were even close to being conceived. And it's also got some of a personal connection to us, which we will save for next podcast. But I'm definitely excited to watch it. I think it's going to be really good. So join us next time. Be sure to check out some of our other content on the channel. We're going to be dropping a new short film super soon. Keep an eye out for that. Until next time, I'm Jackson.
And I'm Adam.